everyone, and welcome. Thanks for being with us for this roundtable. I'm Michel Jouvin, and I'm a journalist for LANC. And so we're going to be talking about automation of the SOC and how far can we go with that. Okay, we've only got 45 minutes and there's an awful lot to say. We would like to have some time for questions also. So we're going to try to be very concise in our questions and answers, but in fact, we're going to try to take questions as we go, all right? And we do need you to speak in the microphone so that everyone can hear. So, first of all, we're going to talk about the scope of a SOC. What are some of the procedures? What are the skills that are needed, depending on the different types of SOC? And what about automation? And then how can AI contribute to optimizing SOC? And so we've got a very expert panel here. So I'll let you introduce yourselves. Bernard. Hello, I'm from Enedis. I was head of cybersecurity for Enedis. And so, in my experience, I can say that in my career, over several decades, I think I've seen all different types of SOCs you can imagine, starting from just a very ad hoc circumstantial one in military-type operations, through the SOC that is part of the fusion center for a very large corporation. So internal, external, hybrid, onshore, offshore. I think I've seen just about all forms of the SOC. And currently, I am working on civil protection, and in particular for the Olympic Games in Paris. So otherwise, in general, I work on cybersecurity in businesses, and I'm part of the CISA Club of Experts. So CISA, in fact, did a study on the different forms of a SOC. So, Moedine. Hello, everyone. I'm practice leader of Neosoft for so in charge of cyber defense operations. So it's engineering, detection, reaction, response. So I'm going to give and taking a very service approach for our clients. So Nasteo, hello everyone. I'm Nasteo Eden. So I'm a CISO and member of the Women's Association. And cyber know-how for women. And because there's such a scarcity of these professionals, we want to encourage women to join the workforce in these technical areas. And so I'm also, work on questions around automation. What is the future need and how is it going to transform our business? And Frank. So Frank Perrier, so head of cybersecurity for Emeria. 18,000 people, France, Belgium, Germany, the UK. And for us, the SOC is something that's been put in place little by little. So I was working alone in the beginning, and then I had one colleague join me, and we put together a very hybrid solution using a managed services, and we have a more protective approach, and we do as much as we can in-house. And I'm also a member of the Cezanne committee. So, now, tell us about the challenges around SOC. So, Bernard, you've got great experience in this field. So, what's interesting about SOC, and I'm sure everyone in the room is convinced of this, the Security Ops Center is a link in the chain of cyber protection, cybersecurity. And so, it's a part of a very complex system, in fact. Okay, but knowing that, what does that mean, in fact? It means that the SOC must have all of the technical and process tools in hand to respond very quickly. Where you have to, the game is over space and time, so we have to learn quickly and adapt quickly. And there's a geographic notion as well, the coverage and of a totally systemic coverage offered by the SOC. So there are different models, and there are advantages and disadvantages. The important thing is to try to find a balance that suits your business. So yes, there's the data gathering and analysis, of course. Frank, tell us about the efficiency of a SOC. So particularly as concerns the response time. Well, yes, as Bernard's saying, that space-time notion, it's all about the context of the business. In fact, you have to really understand the context. You might be very much focused on protection, detecting, the main signals, the strong signal. But if you're looking at perhaps you need to be looking at certain weak signals, but how deep do you go? That's going to depend on the context of the business. Okay, so it is important to have one of responding quickly and figuring things out later. Sometimes you really need to know immediately what has entered your IT system. Yes, time is always an important criteria. And Mouhidine, so how does it work in all of this information sorting? It's true that, well, depending on the models, be they hybrid, in-house, or externalized, you're going to have different modes of operation. So you might be certain standards or levels of service. Particularly if there is an observed incident. And then, we have to see what are the operating modes that best suit a system where part of the service is outsourced and the other part is in-house. So it's really going to depend on the teams who are involved. And Nasteo, tell us a bit about the different levels, 1, 2, 3. So first, second, third level of SOC. Well, let's think about it in terms of the automation, how the alerts, the sorting of the alerts, the classification. What's important to know is that, we talk a lot about standardization because, because if you want to automate a certain aspect, so we have to also think about a broad standardization of operations. And so there are playbooks. Then how do we position the types of actions or reactions or response so we have to be able to manage the risk, but what do you do with false positives, for example? How are you going to analyze them? How deep do you want to go? Is that a medium or high level alert? And so we move up to level 2 of the SOC, etc. So standardization, in fact, is very important in how you're going to manage an incident. And so that can help in the whole sorting process. So yes, the SOCs have different levels of intervention. And also it depends on the client. So when we talk about managing and traceability, there's a lot of challenges here. First of all, you've got the input and the output. So, Bernard, what do you see going through all of those SIEMs and the CERT, of course? Well, the SOC really has to be some very, there's the technical exchange. There has to be interoperability, log collectors. So that's so the first level of the technical process. But at the same time, it's also important, that the language of the SOC be known by the users, the IT teams as well, because the SOC is so much integrated in the organization, the IT. So when you move to a lot of automation, well, then the SOC could force changes on the rest of the organization. So it's very important that the SOC be using a shared language with the other aspects of the business and the operational side of the business. Now, in more mature structures, and we've seen this at Enedis, the SOC activities must be completely transparent, and they need to issue something like a weather report that's understandable to top management and all across the business, in fact. So there's some very technical elements for the experts, but there has to be business summary as well. So what's the residual risk that needs to be managed? And here the board, the top management, needs to understand this. And so the SOC has a role to play there. And so it has to be capable of speaking to those different levels. Some SOC are very omnipresent in the business. Others have a more defined response role. So the idea is to understand the position in the business, the entire business picture. So, well, yes, we talked about, somebody mentioned playbooks. So Nastio, when you what's your experience with playbooks? Well, they are something of a guideline on the different stages of how to react to incidents. So standardizing this can allow you to have the, particularly in terms of detection and sorting, putting in place a grid and the measures to be put in place. Okay, and we heard about interoperability, and so the whole system has to speak to the people who need to intervene. And so it's really the step-by-step process. So it has to be very standardized, as we've said. It has to be using a recognizable vocabulary and to allow proactivity. So, we've got this playbook, we know what to do from A to Z, and it also allows us to institute as much automation as we can, but finding the right balance between, the risk management and then having the confidence in the model that we've put in place, which of course needs to be adapted regularly.
Great. And Frank, we talked about an important point when it came to the contribution of SOC to raising awareness among users. Well, it's very interesting indeed, because I remember doing such a campaign on site with human resources, and they thought it was going to be very technical, but they realized that actually there were Brazilians, Chinese people trying to use their identity, and it happens on a daily basis, basically. So what's interesting is to show the reality of things in SOCs and the tools used for SOCs, as well as the expertise needed. Well, all this allows to show the reality of the situation, and when you meet these people 2 years later, they remember what you had told them because they felt impacted, because they were directly concerned. So yeah, we have very good examples. Sometimes, yeah. Well, add CTI to this, you need was something that needs to be explained to users too. Within you have drawn up a quality manual that is quite impressive. Yes. Well, Neosoft is an ESN offering management services, and all our clients have different maturity levels. And it was very important from our point of view to offer exemplary quality, whatever the client was in terms of maturity. And so we've designed a quality manual by our response and detection teams. And in this manual, you find processes, build processes, run escalation processes. And I agree with Bernard. When it comes to these processes, they are meant for our teams, of course, our SOC teams, but also meant for our clients and their teams. So not necessarily our clients' SOCs, but also any other departments. Like, when you implement scenarios in the industry, in a factory, it's very important to understand what jobs are at stake, and in order to have a positive impact in the response to a security incident. And all this goes through processes with entry data, various steps, and output data. And a process is something that is alive, that is updated constantly, but it helps us commit in a very similar way to our customers with the same level of service quality. Automation relies on standards, and defining such a quality manual is definitely an efficient approach. Now, let's move to a more interesting topic, that is to say, performance assessment of the operational conditions provided by SOC. And so what kind of tools, like indicators, boards? Bernard, what can you tell us about this? Well, I'm just going to say the same thing again. You design KPIs, draw up KPIs as far as time is concerned. How much time is needed to detect a security incident, to analyze it, deploy a correction. And so all this is time sensitive. The more efficient the SOC, the faster it will make the right decision. So this is the first thing. Secondly, the level of blindness of our SOC. What does the SOC see? Does it see all the IT system or part of it? Does the SOC interact with my partners' SOCs, my customers, my clients' SOCs? Because we're beginning to see interactions between teams operating and managing different SOCs. So all these are KPIs, metrics, basically. So it's time sensitive. And second, we need to focus on the scope of the SOC. And, we live in a technological world, so let's ask ourselves the questions. Is my SOC technically state of the art? And it shouldn't be only technically speaking state of the art, but it is also important to integrate this logic as part of the job processes in order to determine what can be automated and what should not be automated.
Okay.
Very well, thank you. Interesting. Muhyiddin, as part of your job, there's you need to focus on reducing false positives, right? It's not that I'm actually flooded by this, but it is our social commitment with our collaborators. I think analysts here, if we have people working in detection services, I mean, the more false positives you have, the more bored you are, and the more bored, the more turnover you have, and therefore you need to reduce the number of false positives, and there are many different ways to do so. But the efficiency of a real positive is based on the trade, basically. Well, if we look at IT, but also it needs to focus on, the art of the trade. Take the example of a company specialized in street topography. In order to make sure that once you make road work, you don't break pipe or whatever. So it's very important to understand how engineers work in order to detect security incidents and set up some kind of automation that would not negatively impact their activities. And I think it's paramount. And when you compare IS operation with when you understand the information system, you understand how users use this system in order to do their jobs. We are given a possibility, an opportunity to reduce the number of false positives. Yeah, this concept of the SOC analyst who is from the outside, who is an outsider, but who look like they are from the company because they know so much about it. Frank, what can you tell us about performance assessment of SOCs? Well, I don't have much to say about it because I haven't reached level of maturity similar to Bernard's. And I think what's important is to make sure that all security incidents are actually reported to a central office. And the second element is about the quality of data reception, because basically the SOC receives information, but if you don't receive information, you're not aware of anything, and log sources stop writing down anything, and you realize it once there is a security incident. And so I know it is time sensitive, but also you need to maintain the operationability of infrastructures. And at the international level, it is something, there you have many different SIEMs, and that's what requires the use of quality indicators and log receptions. Muhyiddin, you'd like to add something to this? Yeah, well, I'd like to insist on the innovative aspect of things, and how can we become more innovative when it comes to our indicators. If you take how a SOC is created, so basically elements are correlated to basically develop a security incident. And so how can you develop the right key indicators for a SOC? Detection time and response time. So obviously, detection time is too long. Response time may be too long too. Well, we have just used Pearson's methodology of correlation. And there are other ways to correlate using different data sets. I was talking about false positives. The correlation between the number of false positives that reaches our analysts and the compliance with PSSI by our clients, and we can connect this with Spearman's method to correlate, and then we have performance indicators that are already used by our services. It's very important to upload SOC information that may indicate wrongful use of the system. And it's more complicated when the SOC is outside of the company. It's not complicated if it's part of the way you do things. You know, Spearman's method to correlate is something we do on a daily basis that just needs to be known, and not everybody knows. Very few people know about it, actually. Bernard, you wanted to add something? Yeah. When it comes to performance, let's not forget that a SOC is made of technological components, and we will try to notice how the right technical operation of the SOC is supervised. And it's easier to monitor when it's on-prem, because it means on-premises, also on-site, because it means it's in-house. But the efficient SOC cannot do without a technical monitoring that pays attention to the operation of the various technical components of the SOC. And everybody needs to know that with the use of automation, this will multiply. The more automation we use, the more it will be important to make sure that all the tools are in good condition, operationally speaking. And so we need to focus on technical monitoring. It's not only about cyber surveillance, but also that it's all about the technical monitoring of cyber tools. So you're talking about blindness earlier on. Now there are a few operation problems. Bernard, your SOC is internal, isn't it? Or do you have both, external and an external and an internal SOC? Both. What are the operational issues you face? It's not, okay, let me answer, not about myself only, but basically as far as the whole CISA community is concerned. So basically, with an external SOC, it is difficult for it to impact the underlying trade impacts, and therefore it provides a generic technological answer, and it does not offer anything specific for the company, which means the company needs some kind of translator that integrates what the external SOC says to turn it into something that can be used by the various services in the company. Now, when you have an internal SOC, it's kind of a speed race when it comes to maintaining expertise, and there's also the question of budget and the economic ability to have the technological tools that are getting ever more efficient. So what I recommend basically is to mix the best of two worlds, of both worlds, and basically you need to think about abilities in terms of company processes, and there's nothing better than, it's not better than the other. And in my experience, in my long experience, It's the convergence of both understanding the needs of customers and of the companies that makes it work. And I've already said it, but the idea is to share the same language in order to prevent the flows of hybridation. And in order to do that, carry out crisis exercises together on concrete cases that are not generic but adapted to the specific to the company. And so we're coming back to SOC performance. Whatever it is, whether external or internal, the more experienced it is, the more efficient it will be. It's an athlete that needs to train.
Yes, you're right to say it has to be tested regularly at the same time. So this is a sort of a maintenance. So Nesteo, some clients have SOCs that are open around the clock, others only working days of the week. What's your experience here? Well, first of all, what is the need and the usage? You don't, it depends on what you're trying to secure, what the value of that is. What are the resources to do this? And so that's the first question, is it, how critical is it? So it's not going to be the same prerogatives for the mayor's office as it will be for an industry, for example. So also the attackers no time. It doesn't matter what day of the week or time it is. Okay. So the idea is to have a certain continuity, and that's where automation makes sense, because it, of course, perhaps be more active. The SOCs tend to be more active when there is human presence and activity, but automation can pick up the slack, perhaps, in the processes, because when you want to have a super fast response time, well, this is based on three things. First of all, coordination with those involved in the SOC. Then there's the availability of the tools and technologies, and then the processes put in place for the response in the event of an incident. And so it's about good practices. Okay, it's not just about state of the art. It has to be adapted. And so, it's important to think about, is this automation going to match the need? And will we be able to trust the tools also to be doing the right job? Then it has to be acceptance of a certain level of risk, perhaps, at the same time. So this is all going to play into the choice of the tools and the degree of protection. And when we talk about automation, well, there's the human factor comes into play as well. And depending on the type of SOC, there's a different skill set that is needed or needs to be developed. And so, Muhyiddin, how do you manage that? The SOC in a broader company, how do you ensure the skill level? Well, training, a lot of it, and continually. And it's not just about data analytics, it's also about understanding our clients as well, going to the different departments, developing a quality manual. And so this is what we need to learn about our clients. So we need to, we have to spend a certain amount of time of this. There are some areas, some industries that we're quite familiar with since we started up, in 2006. So we can take 1 week, or we can do it 2 days a week for 3 months. Okay, it depends on the client. So we need to understand their entire information system and get them to understand that we will become a part of that IS. Then there's also, the question of, staff turnover. I think it's also important for them to feel involved and that their own careers advance. Okay. We sometimes talk about nearshoring and offshoring of the skills. Yes, it's true, but it's not just staffing, of course, it's also equipment. Some clients have a very, remote sites. How do we collect the data? There can be a language obstacle as well. I don't know what the others think, but the English is a good basis. Okay. If we have our analysts in France, but we work for international clients, some multinational corporations. So it means that the clients also have to be very organized for these they are organized for multi-site operations, so we have to deal with that as well. A client who has 3 plants on 3 continents, their organization, the better it is, then it will make the work of putting in place a SOC all the easier. Okay, so yes, you need to understand the activity of the client. We've understood. Now, so what if a SOC detects an event that's close to a cyber attack? So what's the responsibility there? So, who makes the decision on, lock down the system, shut it down? How does that work? Oh, well, this is a good indicator of the maturity of an organization. It's not easy for any business to hit the button to shut everything down and cut themselves off from the world. So in my experience, when you're in such a situation, this isn't for the SOC analysts. It's really a corporate level decision. So when you're preparing for the worst, when you're practicing the responses, so the SOC is there to make recommendations, okay? But of course, it's going to be the management who's going to decide who, what, when is going to press the, hit the stop button, okay? And so if the organizations haven't asked themselves that question, it means you really have to support them in arriving at that level of decision. That's part of our job. Yes, you're right. So the SOC has a role to play, but the decision level is higher. In concrete terms, when an attack hits, it's not during work hours. It's often in the middle of the night during the weekend. And so automation can do certain things. There's an intelligent attacker there, and the response has to adapt to that. So I think it's important that it be around the clock. You can't have on-call teams all the time for that, particularly for companies who've got, third-party suppliers. So then the question is, do we have the ability to say, by default, you shut it down, and then we think? Okay, so there are in some environments where you simply can't do that, but if it is possible, that should be the default response, is shut it down and we'll figure it out later. Isolate the machine, isolate the site. Okay, so, you have to do things quickly. It's true. The attackers are adapting quickly. We have to as well, but then you have to, sometimes you have to make a hard decision. But then the startup, how do you restart the machine is another question. Okay, so final subject. Let's talk about AI and, how can it be used to improve our SOCs? Bernard, well, as you know, we talk about a lot of different forms of AI. We've been talking a lot about generative AI that will help us to ensure that there is no inconsistency in our processes and procedures. It will also help us analyze the past. That's the first thing. Analyze what just happened. Another thing that we expect from AI is to create models of situations to help decision making. When I say model a situation, it's simulate the consequences of certain decisions. So the most evolved attackers are doing that. And so, as defenders, we have to do that as well. So that's one of the main types of expectations. And I believe that AI can help us to do that, not decide in our place, but to demonstrate what are the consequences of certain decisions. So I think that will be a very interesting advancement. So yes, identifying, there's this whole chain of consequences. Moidine. Well, yes, it's the modeling of the responses. How, can AI help us to identify? Okay, so a security incident, we know what it is, we can characterize it, whatever. That we launch a playbook, and it tells us to shut down a department. For example, on all IS, there's. So then how can we show what are the knock-on effects of that? This is important for us to know. Shutting down one service, regardless of what that department is, you can do that. But then the HR might shut down as well. So that's important to know. There's some simple, that's a simple example I just gave, but in industry, the knock-on effects can be huge. So for questions, we'll need you to use a microphone. So I'm a SOC manager for SEB, so I'm quite interested in this topic. So I'd like to know, so in concrete terms, AI, how do you see this? I'm not sure how generative AI is going to help. Can you give me a concrete example? Well, most often there are certain recommendations. There are documents. So if you've got a robot using AI, you ask it to detect similarities, inconsistencies across the documentation in place. And you'll get some surprises there. Of course, you're going to have to take a deeper look, but it can pick out some inconsistencies. And the second aspect of so AI has to allow us to model the consequences of certain decisions. So as we've just said, for a human, for example, it's hard to imagine everything that's going to have the domino effect. So AI should be able to help us to visualize this, raise awareness of this. If you look at, in complex IS systems, there's so much interaction. And so you might temporarily shut down one component or one flow, but there's all this synchronization going on that's not necessarily visible, that might not be very well documented. And so this is where, we need this additional intelligence just to give a sketch out the mapping of these flows. I think that's a very first level. Okay, so you might have a simple level of information. Okay, some things could be done, information architects can probably work this out, but once you're at a more complex level or a hybrid information system, well, it's just going to go beyond what a single person or small team can imagine, particularly when you're under the pressure. Okay, when you have to do something very quickly, we're not going to be thinking about all of the implications.
Any other questions? I see that we've reached the end of this roundtable. And let me add something. There's also the question of being able to analyze all past responses to provide areas of simulations and attacks in order to keep contributing to the continuous training of engineers and so on, in order to have elements that can be used to become more proactive and better responses in the processes, and a level of simulation for all teams working on incident responses. I'd like to add something to automation. So I think that's it. Well, when we automate things, we suppose sources work well. If you automate something that protects accounts, and if there's a flaw, deficiency in the detection tool, and accounts become blocked, and a lot of people who cannot work. And you need to be very careful with these cases. And it needs to be taken into account whenever you automate something. So you need to make sure that you can invert the processes. Because if you change the password, it prevents this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention. And